Hello friends from Southasia, this is Mishu Rahman welcoming all of you warmly to another episode of Talk Dhaka. Today's episode is all about power. We have a very powerful man because that's all he deals with all day. We have a young entrepreneur and his name is Nuher Latif Khan and he is the managing director of Dhaka Energy. And today we're going to talk all about how he started off and where he wants to take the business in the future. Nuher, welcome to our show.
Thank you.
Like I was telling the audience that you deal with power all day. So have you always been an ambitious man?
Well, with regards to ambitions, I think it's more to do with a better life. And once you have that in you, you would strive and pursue whatever in your perception is the better life. So yes, of course, you can say that I've always wanted to do something of intrinsic value, come back and start my own company and get involved with industry. And starting the power sector for me was more of an accident because prior to graduating in London, 6 months prior to graduating when all our friends and peers were applying for jobs, you ask yourself, what are you going to do? Are you going to go back home or are you going to stay back in London? Of course, I'd applied for jobs. I'd applied for 2 banking jobs at Merrill Lynch and NM Rothschild. And I did get a chance at both of these institutions.
You've studied business or?
I studied economics and business at UCL.
Okay.
And then I started cold calling companies. Like I had a list of companies I'd wake up in the morning and just call and ask them whether they would be interested in coming to Bangladesh for infrastructure development or the power sector primarily. Because at that time is when the country started talking about the current power crisis that we're experiencing, that there was an acute power shortage and the government had started addressing these issues.
How long back was this?
That was 2005, around January. So every morning when you wake up, anyways, you read the newspaper, and especially you go on Daily Star and you just see what's going on. So I personally thought it would be a good opportunity to get involved one way or the other, without thinking about everything else that I would experience once I came back to Bangladesh with regards to financing projects and henceforth. So I started cold calling companies, and of course, after calling 100 or 200 companies, most of them would say no, because you're just randomly calling up the switchboard and you're asking them to put you forward through to someone that you can discuss these opportunities with. However, I was very lucky that Rolls-Royce actually gave us a response. And in fact, Rolls-Royce later on became Dhaka Energy's first joint venture partner. We had tendered together for an opportunity under the rental scheme, which ultimately did not go through. But nonetheless, it was a very valuable experience working with Rolls-Royce Power Ventures.
So why did you kind of start to go on your own from the very beginning? I mean, once you graduate, people, they kind of try to gather experience working with other companies, big names,
Right.
But you kind of went into entrepreneurship right away.
Well, it's a sense of adventure, it's a sense of thrill that you want to develop something which is your own, you want to make it the way you want it to be. And I think the thrill effects of it is what inspired me to go forward with it. And then, when I first came back to Bangladesh, of course, there were a lot of challenges. I mean, being 21 years old and just started a company. In fact, I got back to Dhaka right on my birthday, and I just turned 21. And I just mentioned that Rolls-Royce, we were already in discussion with Rolls-Royce, and that was prior to me even registering my company in Bangladesh. So the managing director of the Asia Pacific office emails me saying that I'll be in Bangladesh on the 5th of June. And at this time, he still didn't know I was a student. So I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So I got back in town. I had just went straight to our GSC, which is the registration of joint stock, got the name cleared, made some makeshift business cards to appear a bit professional. So when I first met him, the first question he asked me was, how old are you? And of course, when he heard 21, it doesn't give him a lot of confidence, like, am I dealing with a child? And eventually we started discussing, I started discussing with him our ideas, what we wanted to do with regards to the power sector, and eventually Rolls-Royce did agree to come on board with us. In fact, Dhaka Energy was one of the 2 companies that Rolls-Royce had ever joint ventured with in Bangladesh. So I think that was a brilliant experience because it enabled me to learn a lot about the power sector, and learning from one of the greater players globally like Rolls-Royce. I mean, you understand a lot about the technicals and how a bid is prepared and henceforth.
That's great. So tell us a little bit more about your company, as in how it's set up, Dhaka Energy, what does it do, and where you want to take it in the near future.
Well, when I first started, it was just myself. And as we went along, I realized that it was going to be very difficult for a 21-year-old to draw down finance for these large infrastructure projects.
But Dhaka Energy is actually a barge-mounted power plant?
No. Dhaka Energy, I mean, of course, we would pursue opportunities if they are available, whether the power plant is a barge-mounted one. It just depends on the power plant configuration. But we have 2 power plants right now in our portfolio, a 10 megawatt. It was our first power plant, which we won through competitive tendering. And then now we're doing a 100 megawatt power plant. So the company started with a capital of around 10 lakhs taka, which is approximately $15,000.
Right.
Right now we have an asset base of $67 million with revenues exceeding $100 million for next year.
That's brilliant. And you actually had to compete with an international tender going on.
Of course, we had to compete with all the big players locally and internationally as well. We've competed with companies like Aggreko, Alstom, the international ones, the local ones, of course, the big names like Summit and everybody else, Energy Pack.
So did you really, did you get it done all by yourself, or did you have a mentor to help you through this very complicated process?
As I was saying, when I first got back, the biggest challenge I faced was my age. No one would want to speak to me, no one would want to give me appointments.
That's funny, because this year, the Time Man of the Year is a 26-year-old, so it's funny.
Yeah, but you see, the culture is very different in the United States. They will actually, if you have a good idea, they will actually speak to you. You can walk into a bank, no matter how old you are, and they'll actually listen to you if your financial modeling makes sense and henceforth. But here, the culture is completely different. You would need references. Someone has to make calls for you to give you time. Like I'll tell you this. Like the first time I went to the Bangladesh Power Development Board to meet the chairman, like I'd sent a letter, I'd faxed in, got an appointment. He made me wait for 2 hours, and I didn't end up meeting him. And then I got another appointment with him, and he just sat with me for 5 minutes. So these are the challenges I had faced earlier on, because everybody thinks that what will he be able, is he capable? Will he be able to pull off the project if we give it to him? Will he be able to bid properly? So once we had won our tender and then we had executed our first power project in Sylhet, I guess that adds a bit, and then people think, all right, fair enough, he can build a power plant, though it's not that large a project, but still. But with the power sector, depending on the size, I mean, regardless of the size rather, that the complexity is still the same. Whether you execute a 100 megawatt project or a 10 megawatt project, the process of execution is exactly the same. You just get larger equipment, maybe your other construction works would be more elaborate, but everything else, the process is absolutely the same. So it's once you execute one.
How many other projects the same size as yours exist in Bangladesh?
Right now, with the government endeavors towards the power sector, because it's a trust sector right now, the government has attached a lot of priority to this sector. There's such an important infrastructure component for a developing country. There are quite a few companies that have come up in the recent unsolicited tendering. Not really tendering, the unsolicited scheme that the government has come up with. So I think there are around 11 or 12 other companies which have won projects alongside with us when we had gotten the 100 megawatt power project.
So given the size of a small-scale power plant, it would be, what percentage would it be of the entire need of the country right now?
Well, unofficially, from the private sector, we always say that the shortfall is around 2,500 to 3,000 megawatts. I mean, that's also my personal opinion, and I've said this in many, many discussions, even with the government on board. And that is more or less a 60% to 55% shortfall in terms of generation. So when you look at the figures and the economics of the sector, I mean, it's very compelling, and it's very conducive for investments.
Right.
And that's also one of the primary reasons why I wanted to get involved, because when I first started, I thought that, all right, fine, because I've lived here all my life, because I know a few people in the country, maybe I thought that I would represent an international company and, be their local representative and take it from there on. But as I ventured in, I realized it would be much better if we actually become the developer itself. You can become much more competitive than international companies that come in. So
for your capacity to grow, how long do you think it's going to take? Another 10 years for you to move from a 10 megawatt to 100 megawatt?
Well, we're already 110 megawatt right now. Our 100 megawatt would come online.
But you're producing about under
capacity. We're producing
capacity.
about 10, and our 100 megawatt project will come online next 3 weeks.
Oh, brilliant.
So, well, where do I see ourselves in 10 years? Well, that also depends largely on the sector, because there's so much movements going on, so much new policies the government's coming up with, which is actually very good for the industry. There's a merchant scheme available, which is allowing for far more private sector participation. And with the unsolicited negotiations going on, it actually makes it better, because tendering sometimes does. What happens with tendering, it gets slowed down with government bureaucracy at times, but nonetheless, it is still a very positive sign, what all the endeavors that the governments are taking right now.